Yep, there we go. We got our recording started. So this is the fourth meeting. We hope to wrap up the 3 residential proposals that this working group has been working on. They will then go to the full IECC Code Committee for a vote in July. We hope that we might start hearing these proposals on July 19th. We will finish them on July 26th in the final meeting of the IECC Code Committee. And so we have lots to wrap up today. We're very close, but little things that we need to check with all of you. And so let's go through introductions. I'm Katrina Manigan. I'm the Director of Buildings and Homes for Denver's Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency. We'll go to Courtney next for intros.
Hi everyone, Courtney Anderson here with Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency as well.
Thanks, Courtney. Let's go through our colleagues in community planning and development. Alan, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Alan Yunong, engineer architect supervisor for commercial building plan review.
Thanks. Antonio?
Afternoon, everyone. Antonio Navarra, City and County of Denver, Senior Building Inspector.
Thank you. All right, I think I caught all the city staff here today, so let's run through our stakeholders. I'll start with those on my screen. Jonathan?
Hi, Jonathan Ferdig, architect at Davis Partnership.
Welcome. John Dutch?
Hi, I'm John Dutch. I'm Director of Purchasing for Coldwell Urban Homes.
Thanks for being here. Christine?
Christine Brinker with Southwest Energy Efficiency Project.
Thank you. Bill Rectanis?
Hey, Bill Rectanis with Thrive Home Builders.
Thanks. Rob Buchanan?
Hey, Rob Buchanan, Excel Energy Residential New Construction Product Manager.
Great. Johnny?
Johnny Kocher here with Rocky Mountain Institute.
Thank you, Johnny. And Sirenidi? Sorry if that was mispronounced. And you're muted.
Srinidhi Sampath Kumar, she, her pronouns with Rocky Mountain Institute.
Thank you. And let's go then to our consultants who are helping to write these. Robbie?
Hi, I'm Robbie Schwartz with Build Tank Inc. I am on the NORESCO team that's helping to facilitate code development with the City of Denver.
Great. And Sean?
Hello, everyone. Sean Dennison with New Buildings Institute.
Thanks, Sean. Did I miss anyone? All right. We have a good group today. Thank you so much for being here to help us shape these key high-impact code proposals for the residential space. With that, I will pass it to Sean. Maybe we just briefly review the residential prescriptive proposal. We didn't make any changes to that proposal since we last discussed it. So, but it's sort of foundational then to the residential renewables proposal where we made a couple tweaks. So I might just have you run through both descriptions. We'll take questions then just to clarify what's there. And then make sure we got the changes right and be really thinking about, do we have the overall level of stringency right? I mean, our goal in these working groups is to be on track to Denver's climate goals. That's really how these are currently calibrated, but we also need this to be truly ambitious yet achievable, bold and practical. And so that's what we're looking for this group to help us strike that balance on today. So go ahead, Sean.
Sure. So I think a couple of things to highlight because I think other working groups made some decisions that impacted this. So we want to introduce you to that. First, though, I do want to talk about the addition of or fuel gas utility connection to the definition of all electric property. It is not strictly necessary to say that, but there has been some concern about whether that is included. So just for clarity's sake, we're going to be explicit and include that. We're going to call that out specifically so that there isn't any confusion. And then we have as the working group was talking about demand responsive thermostats for residential, there was the feeling that it needed to be a credit option as opposed to a mandatory requirement to incentivize its inclusion, but recognizing that, if we want to make sure that any requirement around demand responsiveness really meshes well with the programs that are available. So we see the addition of the demand response definitions from the mandatory proposal that now no longer exists. And if we scroll down, we can see the addition of demand responsive thermostats, giving credit, and just one credit. We want to incentivize it, but we don't have, we didn't model this. So this really is a policy credit, we'll say, instead of a modeled credit to incentivize it. And then if we go further down, we can see what the requirements actually look like. For any of you who are familiar with what the mandatory proposal looked like, it was a set of functional requirements, but those functional requirements could result in a demand responsive thermostat that wasn't eligible to participate in Excel's programs. So instead, we said a control that is approved for participation in a demand response program that serves the building site. Right now, Excel is the only one offering those, but we are seeing increasingly the emergence of third-party demand responsive programs. So we want to make sure that we don't close the door to that potential in the future. Those are the big changes. And then the last one is just, we went ahead and we removed the high performance thermal envelope option based on our discussion last time, because basically, projects with a high performance thermal envelope were already getting credit through the space heating electrification, through being able to do very low levels of resistance heating in that option. So they were already basically getting credit for their envelope. And Katrina wanted to make sure that we talked about the overall level of stringency. So I just want to highlight that for people, that we do have the additional, that the 18 credits is higher for a mixed fuel building than it is for the all electric building. All right.
Okay, thanks. Let's take clarifying questions here, and then we'll go through the minimum renewable proposal. Sound good? Anything else you wanted to add this still, Sean? Okay. Eric, welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself? I think everyone knows you.
Good afternoon. Eric Browning, building official, City and County of Denver in CPD. Sean, just a quick question. You were talking about the thermostat and the modified language with respect to the limited, policy-driven 1 point credit for the thermostat, and the language that you had in there was approved. And I wanted to go back to that for just a second, because typically from a code perspective, approved is italicized, and it usually means approved by the authority having jurisdiction. In this particular case, I think the approval that we're talking about here is approval from the utility, right? That's the one that we would be referring. And the good thing is that, okay, so either you just changed that or I missed it, but that could work.
No, I just changed it because you're absolutely right.
Well, all right, moving on then, over to Rob.
Yeah, approved is one of those magic terms in the code that you have to be careful about how you use.
So I had a couple questions, and I'm sorry, since these are as a result of me missing the last meeting. Can you talk a little bit? Can we review, and I'm sorry if this is going to be a rehash, review the decision around 408.3.4? Because I could see a world in which there's a high performance thermal envelope that a builder goes very expensive on the thermal envelope, and as a result goes very cheap on their space heating, and doesn't meet a number of these requirements.
So I'm not sure I understand the question. So you're wondering why it was removed?
Right. So So let's say I build a high performance house, and because I've invested all my money into the building envelope, do I need a heat pump with a COP? Do I need a heat pump that meet conditions 1, 2, 1, 2, and 3 in 408.8.2, or meet the conditions of 408.8.3?
So I think the key thing, let's go down to that section, 408.8.2. So you don't, for the high performance envelope, I think you're thinking of, let's get to it. Where is the high efficiency? Here we go. So 408.2.2. So this doesn't say that you have to have a heat pump. It says that if you have a heat pump, it has to comply with this. And so if you have a truly high performance envelope, a passive house level of envelope, this is what passive house requires for Denver. FIAS, I should be specific, requires for Denver in terms of heating demand. If you have an envelope that can deliver this, then you can do this with just electric resistance. So you don't have to put the heat pump in. If you can heat your building entirely with electric resistance, you're allowed to. You just have to stay under this cap.
All right, that's clear. That helps clarify that.
Great.
I get it. And then under 408.1, for additional energy efficiency requirements, why is 408.8.2 allowed but not 408.8.3?
8.8.2. I'm sorry to be scrolling up and down.
That's okay. I'm doing the same thing. I'm just doing it on a piece of paper.
I think we just didn't get that updated as we made the modifications below. So if everyone agrees, I think we do want to add that up above.
Makes sense to me, and I'm hearing silence from others. Okay. Well, Sean makes that change unless someone wants to chime in. Anything else, Rob? Just to clarify?
Nope, those are all my notes on 47.
Okay.
Check real quick to make sure that we don't have a similar issue with water heating. Okay. So Katrina, should we?
Okay.
Oh, I think Johnny has his hand up.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, thank you. Kind of looking at this table, I see that instead of going a mandatory all electric route, it looks like it's a credit route. And I'm wondering if you could share, how much additional incentive we think this is. Like I'll be honest, I've looked at this table for about an hour now, so I haven't had a ton of chance to dive in, but the extra appearing like 15 credits or so, plus these mandatory 2 other sections. Do we have an idea of how much additional, like how much added incentive this will end up being for an all electric building versus a gas building, in cost, or is that just not something that has been able to be done?
Johnny, I think we can speak to that. I might recommend we go through the other proposal, the minimum renewable proposal, and answer that also. Does that sound good to you, Sean? Because you'll see here an all electric home only has to get 3 credits in this proposal, but then in the minimum renewable proposal, you'll see that an all electric home, it just counts for compliance. And so maybe we can walk through that one also. And then we should probably pull back to this table so that we see sort of, I think, what happens, you know, if someone say just electrifies space heat and water heat, but isn't actually all electric, and run through some scenarios. So everyone is just centered in like sort of how ambitious is or isn't this today, to have that that conversation then about have we struck the right balance. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
All right. So on this one, there's on my okay, I am a mute. There's not been a lot of impact here. I think the primary thing that we wanted to discuss was this issue of the level of stringency. To Johnny's question, just to set the conversation, if you look at the exceptions here for the renewable energy, when the minimum renewable energy is actually required, you see that all electric properties have an exception. You can get there through efficiency instead. So 17 energy efficiency credits, which on a carbon basis has been calculated on the life cycle to be about the same as 20% energy reduction through on-site renewable energy. We also have the path through R406, the path through R405, which is the same thing as the efficiency. And then we've excluded tiny houses and ADUs from the requirement just because of the small roof area and the small, you know, there's a lot of basically the square footage limitations of getting this kind of renewable energy system on these tiny houses.
Thanks, Sean. And I wonder, I'm going to first just ask if there's any questions seeking to clarify understanding this proposal. And if not, I think it would be, or any final kind of just comments technically on the other one. And then I'd like to turn us to that conversation around, is the overall stringency, right? So good question. How is 20% chosen in the chat?
So 20% was chosen as the starting point from all the way back when Denver started its implementation plan. So this goes back to some of the early goals for this code cycle and has remained through the discussions. And I think that that's one of the reasons that we want to discuss that today is, you know, the plans set the starting place for all of these code discussions. And we want to make sure that those initial goals from the plan are still the right goals for this code cycle as we get toward adoption.
Yeah, that's right. Anyone else just seeking to clarify and understand? And then I think we should maybe turn back to the table and we'll do a little review before we get to the stringency conversation. But Rob, go ahead if you.
Yeah, sorry. So if I'm reading number 3 correctly and based off of Robbie's proposed amendments, we're talking about an ERA of 33.
Yeah, it would be. So, and that's quite low. I think probably the
that was yes, it's very low.
And so the advantage of that, and I think that as we look at the ERI and the modeling path, is that they would give you an opportunity to do a hybrid renewable energy efficiency approach. You know, instead of doing an either or. You know, and if we look at the prescriptive path, you know, there's no renewable energy credits in the prescriptive path, so you would have to get there with efficiency alone. But if you had a site constraint where maybe you couldn't quite get enough renewable energy, but you still wanted to do on-site, you could do it with a mixture of on-site and efficiency through those other paths.
Is the goal of exceptions 3 and 4 to pretty much be equivalent to each other?
It is, as much as that is possible with
right. Yeah.
With our various compliance paths in the residential code.
Yeah, section 405, even reading the code book is a little, it's a dense read for me. So I'm having trouble kind of making that, you know, it helps just know that the intention is for them to be similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Sean, before we get into the stringency question, I actually wonder if it's useful to just briefly walk through the ERI path, because of course this proposal, this minimum renewable proposal with these exceptions layers on top of either the ERI path or the prescriptive path in the way it's laid out in the exceptions. And so I think it might just help people think about stringency. To look quickly at all three, we haven't made changes to the ERI path, but just to center our thinking.
Yep, I am bringing it up now. And I will let Robbie discuss anything relevant on this. Where would you like me to go, Robbie?
Can I just, before we move on one more time, I did have one more. I'm really sorry to keep doing this. I noticed the definition for all electric property in proposal 67 is different than it is from 47. Is that intentional?
No, it's not. It looks like it just needs to be.
Okay.
It was changed elsewhere, and I think we might have just missed one of the proposals where it needed to be correlated.
That's fine. I just wanted to point that out if it would learn whether that was intentional or not. So I promise that's all I'm going to try to interrupt.
No, that's great. Thank you for the little catches and clarifications. We needed to start there. Robbie, do you want to give the 1 minute summary of this proposal? It hasn't changed since you all last saw it.
Sure. If you go down to the basis of the proposal is really the energy rating index score of 50, which is right there at R406.4 ERI-based compliance. We got rid of all the table stuff there and just tried to make it straightforward.
Okay. Any clarifications and questions? Christine, saw your hand pop up.
Comment, not a question. Does anyone have any clarifying questions first? Okay, maybe it is a question. I want to see if I'm missing something, because it seems to me like in the ERI path, there's no direct push towards electrification like there is in the other paths, other than that you could avoid having to put in the minimum renewables from the last proposal. And I could see someone saying if we set it at 50, that already kind of benefits all electric since heat pumps are more efficient, but I still think that that would lead anyone doing an ERI path to just put in mixed fuel building and put some renewables on top. And so it didn't seem to match the other paths in terms of favoring electrification.
Well, you have to reach a 50 before you install PV.
But you could do that whether you're doing gas or electric.
Yes, but there are other proposals that are addressing the minimum amount of PV and then other features that you would have to put on.
I think Christine's getting at.
Sure, I'm sure.
Yeah, in the prescriptive path, you have a different target for a mixed fuel versus an all-electric building, and that's not coming through in the ERI path. So for the prescriptive path, you have to get 3 credits, which is basically IECC 2021. If we were to bring that over, we would need to change the language to say that all electric is 55 and all other buildings are 50. The incentivization for in the ERI path is a little bit different because the ERI path was already more stringent than the prescriptive path. So we calibrated the ERI path to Denver's goals absolutely rather than relatively. So rather than say, oh, we need it to be 17% more efficient, we're going to reduce the ERI target by 17, to make it 17% more efficient. We said, well, the ERI path is already doing better. we'll acknowledge what it's doing better than the prescriptive, and we'll just make it, you know, a 50. So that's why it's only 5% better rather than 17% better. But if we wanted to do that kind of electrification incentivization, we would need to change the language above to say that all electric properties only need to get that 55.
Offhand, I would much prefer that approach. And that's the way I've seen some other jurisdictions heading towards. And it does seem like it would match the other pathways better in the intent as well as roughly the results.
Do others have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Split it up, set it to a different requirement for electric than mixed fuel. I think the overall goal is to not make it too much more stringent, because it sounds like the ERI path has been too stringent in the past compared to mandatory. So, I mean, how often are people using the ERI based path as well? Is it like widely used, or is it like not widely used? I think that's I know some other jurisdictions, they don't really use these.
It's currently not widely used, and that's part of the amendments is to make it a simpler pathway that is straightforward and achieves the city's goals.
Yeah. Energy modeling is kind of a heavy lift, it seems like.
Okay. Sean, do you want to start making that change since you're in the document? And I'm happy to take other comments on if folks support having the option of an all electric property. It sounds like it would be a 55. Okay, I'm not hearing other comments about that. So while Sean just starts making that change, and we will go clean it up and review it, but I think it's nice when the working group can see it live in real time. And so can we turn to the general conversation about stringency? And I think Sean can take us back to that minimum renewables proposal once he's done typing here. But I'd love to start taking
with this while switching everyone else.
Oh, that's
over,
true. You could switch. Yeah, if you can switch us to seeing that one, I think, or we can just pause sharing while Sean types that out. So I'd love to just start that conversation about stringency. Because I think this is the proposal where I think we have a real easy way to adjust stringency if we felt like the group felt like we needed to, since it layers on top of both of the other proposals. So I'd love to hear thoughts from folks about this. I don't know if a little bit more summary is helpful. Right, if a building, for example, was not all electric and did not want to do renewables, the thing I think I might summarize is that just in terms of efficiency credits, that would mean that building has to achieve 35 energy efficiency credits, 18 if they're doing prescriptive, right? 18 under the other prescriptive proposal and 17 more here, or an ERI of 33, like you were saying. So if, or like Rob was pointing out. So how is that gut checking when those of you who are, working with these buildings are looking at the table of credits that you all have? This was all sent out from Courtney. If you look at that, I'll stop talking and just ask for comments and thoughts on stringency.
I think this is Bill with Thrive. It's hard for me to gauge that stringency, to be honest with you. I think to get 35 points, you're going to be doing an all-electric home. I don't know that you have a choice in the matter to get 35 points. So I don't know how you get the 35 without being all-electric. I mean, I guess you have gas to the house. Depends on your definition of all-electric, right? I mean, gas cooking, and then you're going to have an electric source of heating and cooling, and you're going to have an electric source of water heating to get to that 35 points. Which I think probably meets the goals. I don't see how you get there without. I'm talking about an all-electric option and a non-all-electric option. you kind of end up all electric from my perspective. Am I missing adding these points up in my head?
Well, I don't know that that's strictly the case, so maybe just to answer that question, I wonder if we can turn back to the points table. And I don't want to just put Courtney on the spot, but I'd like us all to look at it. And I know she was totaling up sort of what this would mean. Like, let's say you just do all electric space heat and electric water heat. If we scroll down to the points there, so a heat pump for space heat and water heat, depending on the efficiency rating of that heat pump. If we can go down, I think it gets you 14 to 18 points. So out of your 35, you would still need another 17 to 21 points if you do electric.
How do you get 14 to 18 points from one piece of equipment?
Okay, so
you add those up.
So you have high performance electric space heat, and then premium performance electric space heat. So one of those is worth 8, the other is worth 10. So you would get one or the other of those for space heat. And then for water heat, if you go down, you can see the high performance electric water heat is 4 points if it's in unconditioned space, 6 points if it's in conditioned space, and yeah, then there's premium up to 8. So that gets a range, assuming that your water heater is in conditioned space of, low end is 6 plus 8, 14 for water heat and space heat, and high end is 10 plus 8, 18 for space and water heat. So that leaves 17 to 21 other points that you'll need if you were, say, wanting to keep gas cooking, gas fireplaces.
Right. I mean, I guess that's the stringency that I'm concerned about. I mean, it's either you're going to be all electric or you're going to be all electric, I think is the way I'm viewing this. Taking cooking out of the picture. I mean, cooking is not a massive source of greenhouse gas, of carbon in the atmosphere. It is a massive preference in the home building industry and the buying public. They want gas cooking. It's the sexy, fancy thing. So builders are going to want to keep putting that in. I think that's the big hurdle towards all electrification in my view is 1, cooking, and 2, I think that there's some significant negative effects of heat pump water heating within the conditioned space that is going to have some. I'm struggling with that and putting that in townhomes in places where the temperature difference in the area where that water heater is located will be significant. And I know the manufacturers say it's not, but it outputs about 200 CFM of air into the space. It's about 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the air that it takes in. So there's going to be an effect there. We're using it. We're going to use it in the future. But to me, the table says either you're all electric or you get to put your gas cooktop in and be all electric otherwise. Right? I mean, I guess that's the end goal, right? The city wants everybody to be all electric, and that's exactly what this is doing. You can't get to the points any other way. And if that's the stringency that wants to be out there, then it looks like that's what's been achieved.
Sean or Courtney, do you want to speak to sort of, I think we did add it up in a previous working group to know that like you could get there without electric space heat or electric water heat, but you'd have to do sort of everything else. Is that right?
Yeah, it's if you don't want to electrify space or water heating, you don't need to do everything else, but you do need to do the lion's share of the other options. So if you think about the ways to get there, and I think if you don't do renewables, then it would be I think it might be actually impossible to get there without electrifying one or the other. Courtney, I'm not sure if it is actually both. You might have to do both, but I think it was just one or the other, plus most of the efficiency options if you didn't want to do renewables. But you can get there with efficiency alone and no electrification. It's just, I think a lot of those options are options that most builders wouldn't, I think a lot of builders would choose at least partial electrification over some of those other options.
Right. I guess my concern is where solar isn't applicable. It doesn't work. Does the builder have much choice or the buyer have much choice in how they design, specify, and construct their home. And this isn't a particular worry of mine now, just because the supply chain has completely crumbled. And having flexibility in the specifications that I choose for my home, and maybe this will all go away, you know, as the market turns, and I don't have to worry about it. But right now it's a massive concern because I get phone calls that says, oh, your heat pump will be here in August. Well, it closes next week. Well, what do you do about it? You have to make another choice, right? And so just making sure that there's some level of flexibility so that there's choice that can be made for cost and supply constraints that are out there in the marketplace. That's my concern. And I don't know that I have a great answer for you, but doing all of them doesn't seem like it gives you a whole heck of a lot of a choice to work through an issue.
Yep. That's super helpful, Bill. And I wonder, I want to turn to others, but I wonder if you can maybe prep, because I'd love to come back to you to hear like what is a doable amount of credits, right? So if you just go through this, if there's going to be some gas, then you have to get 30, and no renewables, then you have to get to 35. And so what are some options and what might seem yeah, Courtney, go ahead. Just because I want to respond, just to see if we can kind of get to the bottom of where Bill is at, and then we'll go to Johnny and to John. But Courtney, you said it quickly adds to 30 if you don't do electric, space, or water heat. Do you want to point out exactly how that happens? And then maybe Bill, you can run some other scenarios for us too. But
yeah, I was just going through the chart and adding up everything that's available if you're not doing electric, space, heat, cooling, or water heating. And those are the points that I was able to get to. So in this scenario, you would need to partially electrify. And I do want to maybe clarify too, this isn't the commercial proposal. We don't have the renewable credit in here. So Sean, I think maybe we need to clarify that. You can't like get the renewable points within this because it's in a separate proposal.
Right.
Unless I'm missing something.
Two other questions, one of which is my lack of understanding of how the code really works from section to section, but it does say in here that it has to be in addition. These are in addition. Well, the points here being used cannot also be used to satisfy 405. And I think Robbie said earlier on that 405 is really more of an envelope calculation. Is this making sense?
So 405 is modeling as opposed to ERI, which is a rating index approach. So yeah, 405 is computer simulation of performance.
So can I meet 405 without putting any of these things in my home?
I think probably in general, you would find that you need to do similar types of measures in 405, but you would have more flexibility because you would be able to tune in, say, exactly what your UA is for your walls, and exactly what the efficiency is for the equipment. And then the modeling is that the prescriptive path is inherently conservative with the way that it ascribes points, and the modeling path, since it's more sophisticated, doesn't have to be as conservative. And so you might find that you don't have to do quite as many things.
I guess my concern is these are additive the way I'm reading this. I can't use, to meet 408, I can't get points for anything that I've used in 405. And so by reading that, if I'm reading this, if I'm any remotely close to understanding this, it means that from starting point of 0 points, some of these things are off the table for me.
So I think I understand your question better now. So if you go through 405, then there's two ways that you can do it. You can either model your building without including anything that you did in 408. Or you can include the things that you would have done in 408, but you have a different modeling target. So it's kind of a confusing element of the underlying code. The IECC didn't implement 408 in a very clear way, but in Denver, we've written the proposals to try to leave the IECC intact as much as possible, recognizing that practitioners would be moving from one jurisdiction to another, and we didn't want them to kind of get shocked when they come to Denver and it's like, I'm used to this being here and now it's not there and it's worded differently and it's confusing. So
Yeah.
we've kind of inherited this little bit of confusing language from the base code.
I guess my worry is, and I lack the expertise to figure this out, like, or to really understand it, I guess, or the history. But if I can't do solar and I've got to get 35 points, can I get 35 points without including stuff that I did in 405? Like, I don't, or is, because this section says you cannot use anything used in 405, have I already crossed enough off the table that I legitimately can't meet the code? I can't hit 35.
No, it says you can't use anything from that you use to meet 408.
I thought I read for buildings complying with section 401.
Make sure there's
right. That the building shall comply with 408 without including such measures proposed in the design of 405. And 401 is, which pathway is 401.2.2? Is that performance?
So it says that the renewables that you include, so the renewables for meeting this requirement, the minimum renewables requirement, can't also be used to meet your performance targets in 405 or 406. So it's that line prevents you from double counting your renewables.
Just renewables.
Just renewables. So if you're not doing renewables, well then, and you're going through this path on one of its exceptions, then, you're not using renewables to meet this requirement. You're going through the exception. So you could use, like a partial renewable, 10% of your annual load from renewables, say, could be used still under 405 or 406.
Is that renewables? Is that what's in 401.2.2? Like, I'm confused. I don't see renewables anywhere in here. I apologize. I'm clearly not understanding something.
So there is the line in the proposed 404.4, which is the minimum renewable energy system capacity, that says on-site renewable energy systems used to comply with this section shall not be included in the calculations for section R405 or section R406. So that is very specifically about renewables used to meet this requirement.
But Sean, I think, see if I get this right, Bill, I
yeah.
think Sean Bill's trying to ask about this 0.2 here. What's it referring to? This 401.2.2? We do need to move on, but like, I don't think you've answered Bill's question about what 0.2 on the screen right now is referring to.
That's actually in the 408 proposal.
That you're showing us right now, Sean.
So the 401.2.2, that is how you comply with going through R405. So it gives you, and that's
so 402.2.2 is simply a clarifying section that opens the 405 door to compliance.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I'm trying to help Bill, because I kind of see, I think I see your concerns.
Maybe we can just take that offline, Bill, because I don't think the intent, I think we still need to get to the bottom of that, but I don't think the intent is to say you can't count something under 408 that counted under 405 except for renewables, right, Sean?
Well, it's you can't count. it gives you two options. If you go through 405, you can either comply with 408 separately outside of your calculations, or you can ignore 408 entirely, in which case you have a different performance target for R405.
Okay.
Now, just to be clear, R405 uses an energy model, and the energy model doesn't solar doesn't impact the energy model.
But heating and cooling equipment do.
Yes.
So if I use a heat pump water heater in there to get to my target, I can't count that in 408.
It doesn't directly it's the cost compliance. It doesn't directly impact your model because the model, like you said earlier, is based off of the thermal envelope, house tightness, duct leakage, and your proposed equipment would also, whatever you use in your equipment would go into the reference home in the energy model. So the efficiency impacts it slightly, but the it's not the same as the energy rating index. It's not a direct comparison.
I think
I mean,
the key
you
thing
guys
to
just
keep
understand my concern. I don't want to, if we have to get basically everything on the sheet, I'm exaggerating a little bit, everything on the sheet to achieve the 35 points without solar, I want to make sure that 405 doesn't eliminate any of those options.
Yeah.
Because you'll need them to get to 35 points.
Bill, I think I'm on the brink of an understanding. So I think maybe you, me, and Robbie can hop on a different call to get relatively level set on here. Like I said, I think I'm on the brink of a breakthrough, but I hear your concerns, and I share them without additional understanding.
Okay, I think we can make sure that it achieves that end, Bill. And we need to just check the language. But so let's keep moving. I had seen
can
I
I ask the working group a quick question? So we didn't fix this confusing underlying language for the reason that I gave. Would the working group prefer that we fix the underlying language to make it clearer? It would mean that Denver's language would look different from its neighbors, and that would impact practitioners. But you know, would the clarity be worth it?
If it's clearer, then I would think yes.
I agree.
If it's equally muddled, then no.
No, it can be clarified substantially. I would say that the way that R408 was implemented in 2021 IECC is asinine. It is so bad.
We don't want to provide consistent language if it's poorly consistent. I think we would want to change the language, and maybe our partners along the Front Range can adopt improved language in their process. But for the user, I think that's most critical that it be as clear and concise as possible.
Okay.
Okay. Let's keep going on the stringency conversation now that at least the intent that we have is more clear. I do want to circle back to you on that, Bill, but I want to go to others just while you're thinking about if 35 is maybe feeling too ambitious, what does seem doable as you're looking at that table. I want to just check in because I saw John Dutch's hand go up for a little bit. I know you have it back down, but because you haven't spoken yet, if there's something you want to chime in on, I'd love to hear from you, John.
Most of what I was going to say was leaning towards everything that's just been iterated. One of my big concerns, though, is in mandatory renewable energy. As far as townhomes are concerned, I see that being a struggle. I don't know if anybody has done any studies trying to hit the numbers required with existing product that's already out on the market. As far as solar shading and building orientation and all of that stuff is concerned, the majority of the townhomes that are being built today have, at least on the rooftop area, because everyone's going skinnier and taller, have some sort of outdoor living space, which requires a stair tower up to the roof area, which by its nature is going to provide shading.
Right.
So
Okay.
I
That's
see that
really
being a
helpful.
big issue.
That's really helpful. And of course, they don't have to do the renewables, but they'd have to do 17 more efficiency points under that proposal if not renewable. So I'm going to put the same question to you. What does seem doable if it's not the full 35 points, if a building can't, if a home can't do, or a townhome can't do solar? Let's see if we can kind of get a gut check sense from a couple of the experts. I'll go to Johnny now, who I know has had his hand up, but I want to circle back for kind of a what is doable, what is ambitious but achievable. Go ahead, Johnny, though.
I mean, all electric. And I think that that's kind of, if you went all electric in that townhome, then you wouldn't have to do mandatory, all these extra additional efficiency. And I think that these proposals are interesting, and, I get the incentive to try to do this, but it seems like from the simplicity of a code standpoint and also just enforceability and just like general understanding, just a all electric mandate would make a lot more sense than trying to push for a million different credit options and a very confusing kind of rigmarole to try to do there. So I know that the natural gas, sorry, just one more thing. The natural gas system is going to continue to expand, and we're going to be putting in infrastructure that we know is going to become a stranded asset in the future if we continue to build even like 5% of the homes being with gas. So an all electric mandate from a system-wide standpoint, from stranded asset standpoint, probably makes a lot more sense than just allowing these folks who don't want to move towards all electric the option to do these really kind of ridiculous energy efficiency requirements to get out of it.
Thanks, Johnny. That decision sort of came to this working group from the code committee, where there really wasn't an appetite for that all electric mandate, but we hear you and thank you. I want to go to, let's see, John Datt, you have your hand back up.
Yeah, and I completely understand about going the all electric route. It's just, we have to be able to build and sell houses. And, we were using heat pump water heaters for years, and we quit using them because of the almost unanimous hatred for them from all of our homeowners. They substantially cool the space that they're installed in, and especially with townhomes, most people are going to crawl spaces or slab construction. You got to have 700 cubic feet set aside specifically for the heat pump water heater in order for it to work correctly. There are methods of bringing in intake air and all of that to reduce that space, but then you're talking also constraints with length of pipe that you're allowed to use for the intake and exhaust and all of that. So there's just more and more challenges that we're having to deal with. So.
Great, Christine, and then I want to just, so very brief, and then I do want to get a gut check from Bill and John and others, just like if somebody wants to propose like what might be doable numbers of points. Go ahead, Christine.
For what it's worth, I have a heat pump water heater and I think it's awesome. I love it. I haven't noticed those problems. Actually, I love the free cooling in the summer. I love to stand right in front of it. And in the winter, we just vent it outside. And then I know in the whole picture, the heat pump itself picks up a little bit extra load, the air source heat pump next to the heat pump water heater. But hopefully the technology is improving based from the experience of your previous homeowners.
Can I, thanks, Christine. Can I go back to Bill? Do you have a recommendation on what might be that sort of ambitious yet doable if you needed to propose, or is 35, as you think about it more, okay if there's no electric equipment?
I don't, that's a tough question. I don't know. The only thing that comes to mind is structuring the point so that you could potentially choose either electric space heating or electric water heating and be able to comply. So you're making a step forward, but you have some flexibility in how you meet that. I don't have anything to base that on other than just creating some level of flexibility. I do have one other quick question. In the 408 here, it says Energy Star appliances gets 4 points, and it lists a number of appliances that must be included. Most of those appliances are not typically included as a standard feature from most home builders. So does that make those points immediately off the table, or should that say, if provided, must be Energy Star qualified? Because in most builders, washers, dryers, refrigerators, they're not part of the standard package. So the only thing you got in there is dishwasher, but remembering what was on there.
Mm-hmm. The way that this is phrased, those appliances would actually need to be installed in order to qualify, because the savings is based on having those installed. And if they're just left blank until the homeowner moves in, then we don't know, what they'll install. If it were based on, appliances that are installed, then I think the credit value would have to be reduced to 1 or less, based on the appliances that are actually typically installed. So this would require builders to go a step further. That's why it's an option as well, because not all builders are going to be able to do that. They're not all going to be able to either have a client that they can pick the appliances, before they get their certificate of occupancy, or where they're a market where the builder can choose appliances for a prospective buyer. I mean, that's not every builder, so that's why it's an option and not mandatory.
Right, and I understand why it says that, but it takes more points off the table, because that's just not standard practice.
So I guess then my question would be, if to maybe make it a little bit more specific, if adding 17 in efficiency, if that feels like it's pushing too far, then what is manageable under the market? Is it 10 extra credits that have to be achieved? Is it 7? Looking at the credits that are available and how many extra you might have to do if you're a mixed fuel building without renewables, kind of where is that threshold for doable?
I know that we're almost at time. I can go to you, Johnny, but I wanted to just pause and see if we can hear from any of the code committee members. I'm thinking folks don't have an exact number for us, though, is what I'm hearing here today. And so I also think I might just ask a process question of the group if I could, because I think we could go ahead and either keep this as is or reduce it a bit, and then take this to the code committee for a decision. It will be the minimum renewable proposal where they really get to decide stringency. But I don't know if someone sees a more graceful solution here. Johnny, it sounds like you put your comment in the chat. Thank you. And it's okay if anyone needs to drop. I know we're at 4 o'clock. But any final words on process? Are you okay if we sort of move this to the committee? Would you like us to reduce it some before it goes to the committee? So, I mean, I'm getting a sense that we don't have comfort from the group on the minimum renewable proposal. 17 is feeling like too much. Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, no, that was me.
Or Rob, sorry.
No, that's okay. It doesn't feel like we have consensus.
I think the proposal is structured the right way. We just don't quite have stringency consensus, and I'm not sure how to help the committee understand stringency when this group, like, is there a way that, like, maybe I'll ask the question a different way. Is there a way, like, Bill and John, who are on the committee and build homes in Denver, that we can get you some more data to think about where this should sit? Because I think ideally the committee would love to hear from the, residential members of the committee that this fits and makes sense to you and is doable, and yet ambitious. So, like, what would you need to help figure some of that out? How could we help?
Well, for me, I think if possible, having a call with Rob and Robbie to understand how the modeling works in association with this.
Yep.
How I would achieve 408. And then if I needed to add the minimal renewable, non-renewable option on top of that, is it achievable?
Yeah.
And through how many pathways? Because it sounds to me like it's achievable through, in essence, one pathway.
And do you think we could do like a working session with you and Rob, and Robbie and work through some of that?
I'd be up for it.
Okay. John, what about you as another committee member? What could help you kind of work through this?
Yeah, I just need some more time to digest and run numbers and base it all off of where I'm currently at as far as performance is concerned and where I can comfortably go without throwing costs into a tizzy.
Yeah. Is there any way we can help with that, or do you just need a little bit of time?
I just need a little time.
Okay. Could I ask for that? I mean, we're sort of trying to get this out to the code committee very soon. But could I ask for that, like, say by the 5th from you, John? And maybe we meet with Bill and Robbie. I don't know if we could schedule a time on the 5th. Thank you all for running past just a minute now.
The 6th.
Yeah, I'll vote for the 6th as well. 6th is really good for me. 5th is a non-starter.
I can do the 6th.
I can do the 6th as well. The
Okay.
morning better. We can pull up an energy model and look at it.
That'd be helpful.
And is it possible for RMI staff to be on the call? And Christine, I'm guessing you would be interested too.
I probably wouldn't need to be, as long as the goal is clear that we do need to be ambitious yet achievable. Not just business as usual.
Yeah. Can I say 9 or 10? Just to pick a time so we don't have to do a whole doodle poll thing.
I can do either one of those times.
Yeah, let's shoot for 9.
9. All right. We're going to send something out for 9 a.m. on the 6th. And do you want to join that, John, or do you want to just run your own numbers?
I can join that.
Okay. I will go ahead and invite, and I know Christine, you won't have to be there, but I'll invite, I think we'll just basically invite most of the working group, or we'll sort of around, I think we'd probably I want it to be a useful working session though too. So, we may limit numbers a bit more just on that, but, we will get that scheduled, to dive into some of the modeling and some of the numbers. Thank you all so much. I'm happy to stay on, but I want to let people go if they need to go. But especially, like Christine, you didn't want to join. So if you want to chat for another minute now, if you don't have time, that's okay. Or the RMI folks, if you have just a minute to stay now. And then I think we just need that working session on the 6th. So we'll get that out.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. I can stay back.
Yeah, I had a clarifying question about the renewables policy. So I saw you had to put a certain amount per square foot of the house. But how does that end up covering like all of the roof space of an average new house, or a tiny fraction of the roof space of an average new house, or somewhere in between?
If you talk about a mixed fuel, then I think we're starting to push toward a net zero house in terms of performance. So I think the comments about tall and narrow, for townhomes is probably apropos for those, for true townhouses. And I didn't ask the question whether he was talking about like code townhouses or what the market calls townhouses and are actually R2. But so I think that for townhouses, we might see that it starts to be challenging, but for traditional construction, because of the efficiency levels that we're talking about, we're going to be talking about smaller arrays to get to 20% than I think people often would have been, thinking about how they can get to 20% with their existing homes.
20% of the electric load?
20% of the annual energy use. So the annual energy production of the energies of the on-site renewable energy system has to be, 20% of the annual energy use. So you do have to do some calculations.
Okay. If you were to ask a solar guy who was totally gung-ho on solar, would he say that 20% of annual energy use is wimpy or totally awesome?
I'm thinking of a couple of solar guys, and I know that a couple of them would just say totally awesome. Because, I think that they are in general used to single family homes. Yeah, so 20% is doable for a lot of single family homes without a particularly large array. Once you start to talk about non-typical single family homes, which would fall under this, then it might start to get that story might change.
And sorry, is that